From Yahoo Finance, this is Electionomics. I'm Rick Newman.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous. And in this week's podcast, we are looking at what a Joe Biden presidency might look like. And Rick, we know that Biden racked up lots of delegates in these latest primaries. He seems to be the presumptive nominee for the Democrats. I guess given the backdrop we have right now with the way Wall Street's behaving, do you think that Biden, first off, would be better for the markets than, say, Sanders or even Trump?
Well, he'd certainly be better for markets than Sanders. And you're right, we have had just an amazing turnaround here in the last couple of weeks of voting. All the political analysts I'm following, they're all saying we've never seen such an abrupt turnaround in a primary election season. We've seen surprises. Trump winning the Republican nomination in 2016 was a surprise, but that went till fairly late in the game. Biden's campaign was all but dead, and now he's just streaking to the win. So Bernie Sanders is not out yet. There is still a very, very narrow pathway to him getting enough delegates to get the nomination. But the Biden campaign would basically have to collapse at this point. So my best guess is we're going to have Bernie Sanders around for at least a couple more weeks. I don't think I could be proven wrong.
So you think there's going to be a debate? You think Biden and Sanders get a chance to debate?
I do, and I think that's one of the reasons Bernie Sanders will stay in. I think we have two more scheduled debates. I think he wants, he's
a better debater than Biden.
He is. And it's a national audience. Politicians above all things are basically egomaniacs, and I would include both Biden and Sanders in that. And I think he wants to be able to talk to the nation. And by the way, if we do get another debate, it's going to be I think it's just going to be Biden and Sanders.
Right.
So
Tulsi
just
Gabbard
two guys on a
part of
stage.
that.
And by the way, no audience. So it would
They've announced that because of COVID-19.
Very different debate. It would almost be like a very substantive, almost like an academic debate for anybody who debated in high school or college. They would just have to
C-SPAN
really go to it on the merits. Right. And honestly, I think it'd be welcome.
Maybe we'll actually get some stuff talked about, right?
Seriously, after all the theatrics and everybody trying to, get their 10-second zinger that will go viral on the internet. Maybe we would just have less of that, less insults, less, arguing about who did what, who voted for what 40 years ago and so forth. But at some point, I am just afraid. I'm sorry to all the Sandersistas out there, whatever you call yourself.
Oh, no. He's down for the count.
By Bernie's.
You think it's just a matter of time? It's just a matter of time. Yeah. All right. So then let's play pretend.
We'll put Bernie back up for now.
He's still standing, so I think you should put him back. If we play pretend for a moment and look at what a Joe Biden presidency might be, let's talk about some of the policy differences, not only between Sanders and Biden, but between Biden and Trump, who is what this would really come down to. And right now, healthcare is top of mind for lots of reasons for many people. Let's start there. What is Biden's healthcare policy?
Well, to me, the biggest development that we can say with some level of definity is that Medicare for all is dead. This was, of course, Bernie Sanders' big idea, a giant government program that would insure everybody and eliminate private insurance. So that was his big plan. Elizabeth Warren also supported that plan. And, the votes people are not voting for Bernie Sanders, and they weren't voting for Elizabeth Warren either. It's kind of interesting because when you look at the exit polls, when they ask, most of these are mostly Democratic voters in the Democratic primaries. Some states have open primaries where anybody can vote, but it's mostly Democrats. 58% say they support Medicare for all. So that sounds like a high level of support within the Democratic Party. But there's a lot of confusion around this plan, and there's some other polling that shows that more than half of people who say they support Medicare for all don't actually know it would eliminate private insurance. So I think what Democratic voters are saying is we want repairs to the health insurance system and to the health care system. Everybody knows what the problem is. There's no secret here. Healthcare is just too expensive, even for people who do have insurance. So, this is a big deal now that we're talking about coronavirus testing. Who's going to pay for it?
Right.
So we now have the government saying, well, insurance companies are going to pay for it. But what about people who don't have insurance? How do they get tested if they have it? Who's going to pay for that? It's a big mess, and it nicely illustrates a big problem that we have with the healthcare system, even in normal times. So Joe Biden does not support Medicare for all. He does not want a huge government program, but he does support a new public option that would be like Medicare, but would leave private insurance in place. So if you have private insurance, the way we do, we're covered by Verizon because we work for a big company. That would remain.
So does he want to keep Obamacare, which he was part of, putting that together? He wants to keep that intact and then add sort of addendums onto that?
Yeah, it's a little complicated how this might actually work. And if under certain types of a public option, you really wouldn't need Obamacare anymore because what the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, I mean, that did a lot of different things, but one of the things that did was provided subsidies for people to buy insurance in the private market. They did try back then. That was 2010. I mean, there was an effort to actually establish a public option. It's not a new idea. The idea being it could either be part of Medicare, so you could buy into Medicare, and this would not be free, by the way. Medicare is not free, but you would pay anybody who enrolled in this public option, whatever it is, you would pay premiums that would basically be enough to cover the costs. The idea is this would, by being a large government program with a lot of people in it and also no profit motive, that it would just be cheaper, more affordable for people, including people who are sick. And people in that age bracket from that crucial age bracket from, let's say, 50 to 65 before you qualify for Medicare. So anyway, Biden has said, look, I was there to establish the Affordable Care Act. I want to leave that in place, fix some things that are wrong with the Affordable Care Act, and there are some things wrong with it. And but at the same time, one of the biggest problems with the Affordable Care Act is families who don't qualify for subsidies. So it's based on a multiple of the poverty level income, so it changes every year.
Okay.
But right now, for a family of four, if you make more than it's around $100,000, you just don't get any subsidies. Zero. You get no subsidies. And if you are an independent contractor or you run your own business or you work from home or something like that, and you're not covered by a big employer, you have a very hard time getting.
That's a hardship for sure.
It is. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people in this bracket. It's only probably a couple of million people, but it's a lot of hardship for those people. And I mean, they pay insurance premiums easily of $25,000, $30,000 a year, and sometimes that's bare bones. And then there could be a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible on top of that.
Wow.
You're talking about. So these are people who they earn too much money to qualify for subsidies, yet they could be paying a third of their household income for health, just for insurance.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy. That is a giant problem, and it's appalling that Congress hasn't done anything to fix that. So as with many things, many ideas for how to fix that. There's no shortage of ideas. There's just a shortage of votes in Congress and some path forward. So anyway, Biden wants to, fix those problems with the ACA and at the same time build this other public option. Now, those ideas are in conflict. Because one would sort of compete with the other. And you might say, well, if you're going to build a public option, you really don't need a lot of the things under Obamacare. So it's possible Obamacare could morph into a public option. And we should not pretend that this would be politically easy, even though it's not Medicare for all. And it would be not nearly as drastic as what Bernie Sanders wants. It'd still be really hard to get put into place. And it would probably require Democratic control of both the House and the Senate. But, one of the things that as we now sort of start looking toward the general election, it's not out of the question that Democrats could take control of the Senate. It really,
We're hearing that more and more now.
The coronavirus is a huge wild card. By my estimation and that of many others, President Trump is really doing a poor job of leading on the coronavirus. We're getting conflicting messages out of the administration. We may end up doing another podcast on that at some point.
Oh, I think it deserves it. I mean, just
real
recently,
opening for Democrats.
President Trump himself is calling for a payroll tax cut to last through the election. I don't know what you read into that, but it sort of seems almost like a desperate last-ditch effort as he now sees more clearly who his opponent's going to be in the general election.
Yeah.
He's trying to pull out all the stops, but for him, it may be too little too late. We're going to know a lot more as the virus continues to play out and in the months ahead.
We'll talk about that another time, but I will make a prediction. I don't think Congress is going to pass. That's something Congress would have to pass into law. I don't think Congress is going to pass a payroll tax cut.
All right, they better start passing something, though, because we're going to need some help.
Europe
is far ahead of us in this
Congress
area.
Congress has already passed that $8 billion bill to help to provide resources for whatever is needed just to deal immediately with this virus, new testing kits and stuff like that.
But they're talking about extended paid leave, the IRS perhaps extending when we have to pay our tax bill. So more to come on that.
Can I just wrap up on to go back to what we were talking about healthcare. So you said, what about the differences between Trump and Biden? And I did not abide by your advice. I was talking about the differences between Biden and Sanders. But the difference between Biden and Trump on healthcare. So we know Biden favors some reforms that I think are going to be generally popular with all voters. And Trump, of course, Trump is still trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now, he's not campaigning on that anymore, but we've talked about this before. The Trump administration is a party to a lawsuit that is literally trying to kill the entire ACA in court. And I think that's a real problem for Trump because, first of all, the ACA now has a favorability rating above 50%. It has become generally more popular as time has gone on. I think a lot of people have realized it didn't fix all problems the way Obama said it might. Obama overstated how effective the ACA was going to be, and that was a mistake on his part.
He did.
But it has not really caused problems either. And there are some things in the ACA that are very popular. The most important one is the prohibition on denying coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. That went away under the ACA.
Right. We'd want to see that. But Trump has said he wants to continue that with whatever plan he moves forward with.
Well, nonetheless, that's what he says. But at the same time, he's trying to kill the entire ACA, which would eliminate that prohibition. So insurance companies could go back and deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions unless Congress passed a new law that said they didn't do that. So it's it's an incoherent policy. So Trump favors something that's in the law, but he wants to repeal the law and then separately go back and pass the same thing that's in the law, which the Republicans couldn't do when they controlled Congress. It's a totally incoherent policy. And if the Biden campaign is sharp, I think they'll be able to really exploit that. I don't know if they will, but
speaking
they
of
could.
Incoherent, whether it's true or not, things are trending all over the place and on Twitter about Biden's cognitive health. and
senility. I think senility is the Twitter word.
Right, 78 years old. He's getting around okay, but they are highlighting some sound bites where he sounds less than sort of together with his thoughts. Some are saying that he has been not doing media interviews, one-on-one interviews, which we really have not seen him do because he is having some problems. Is that a huge vulnerability, I would imagine, for Trump to lay into Biden if and when the time comes? And do you think it's enough to actually work against Biden?
I think for sure, but it depends how apparent this becomes to voters in the general election. And we are going to have assuming it's Biden, we are going to have debates between Trump and Biden, and I think those will be definitive. I mean, those will be available for everybody to see. Everybody will know what really happened, and they won't, without having to guess some little clip they saw on the internet. Has it been doctored?
Right.
And some
those
of the Biden, by the way, some of the Biden things that are on the internet have been doctored. And Trump has actually retweeted some of those. So
Twitter took it down, but not Facebook, I believe.
Right. And we're going to see a lot more of that. So for starters, it's going to be a little bit difficult if you're just looking at it online, what's real and what's fake.
Actually, I misspoke.
That's going to be a big problem.
Twitter actually came out and highlighted that this was, they labeled it saying this was,
right. But even,
they didn't take it down.
It's a lot of places other than Twitter and Facebook
Absolutely.
too. So this is going to be out there. And then on the other hand, there are also videos of Trump mangling words and misspeaking and slurring words.
Wow, that's going to be quite the debate between these two.
I think we might have mentioned this in our last podcast. The Daily Show has put together these montages of Trump's difficulty with language. So it's going to be, competing senility narratives.
Goodness.
Will this be an advantage to one or the other? I mean, impossible to predict. There often are these things you cannot possibly foresee that end up becoming important.
Like coronavirus, which could wind up defining the Trump presidency.
It could,
because as we're going to the polls, this will still. You would have to think it's the closest thing that will have happened to the election. It will be top of mind the way his administration dealt with it. I want to get back to what a Biden presidency might look like, and what's his take on taxes?
Yeah, this is important. So major distinctions between Trump and Biden on tax policy. Trump, basically at this point, he's basically campaigning on his record. I don't think he has floated this idea of another middle class, even before coronavirus. He was saying, I don't think there's really a realistic chance that would happen before the election. And then if Trump were to win re-election, I don't know why he would press for another tax cut, because he just got a big tax cut in 2017. So Trump is basically the status quo candidate at this point. Keep America great. To my mind, that's his new slogan. To my mind, that is basically just let's just continue with the Trump policies. But here's what Biden would do differently. So Biden, first of all, wants to raise the corporate income tax rate back, not all the way back to 35% where it was before Trump cut it, but to 28%. So the Trump tax cut in 2017 cut it from 35% to 21%. Biden is saying, let's put that back to 28%. Interestingly, people don't remember this, but Obama, in his budgets, when Biden was the vice president, he also favored a reduction, which would have been from 35 to 28% in the corporate tax rate then, but only if you close a lot of corporate loopholes. So for Biden to say, his starting point is a 28% corporate tax rate, I think you could see this. It would require Democrats to control both houses, but I think you could see middle ground settling on 25% corporate tax rate. I think you can ask how would markets react to that. I mean, we had a bull market rally during the Obama years when the corporate tax rate was 35%, and it continued when the corporate tax rate got cut to 21. So other things remaining equal, would 25% make a difference? I don't think it would make that much of a difference.
But probably right.
Anyway, some of the other things he wants to do, he would restore basically the top two tax rates back to the Obama levels. So Trump, the 2017 tax cut, also lowered tax rates for everybody. But many Democrats say the wealthy didn't need a tax cut, fine to lower for middle class, but it was a mistake to lower for the wealthy. So he would basically go back to the old tax rates. It's mostly for incomes above 400,000 people. That's, I don't know, that's a top 1 or 2%, something like that. He would make big changes in the estate tax. And it gets a little complicated, but that would basically go up on people who have large estates. And then another big change is for people who earn above $1 million. He would change the capital gains tax, and he would say, if you are making $1 million or more in capital gains, we're going to tax that the same as income at your tax bracket. That would actually be a very large change for people in that bracket, because for long-term I hope I get my numbers right here, but for long-term capital gains, the tax rate is 15%, which is low.
Right.
The highest tax bracket right now for labor income is 37%.
So that's a huge
that'd
jump.
be a big change to go from being taxed at 15% all the way up to 37%.
And the last thing you want to do is unincentivize people to invest.
Well,
I don't know if that would be a deciding factor, but
so you asked the question: would you actually disincentivize people to invest? And I mean, you have to weigh that against the fact that we're running $1 trillion deficits every year or more. So somebody is undertaxed in America, because we should not have $1 trillion deficits. That's the gap between what the government takes in and what it spends. So either somebody
maybe
is
simply
undertaxed,
the government's spending too much,
or
they overspend,
or that's right. So something's wrong there, and this is what elections determine: is how do these levels of spending and taxation get set, and they do vary under different administrations and under different parties. So what you would see under Biden is an effort to raise more government revenue, and he would spend it on things we've been talking about. I mean, the public option, the healthcare public option, it could be self-funding, but it probably would require some additional revenue. And again, people would pay, that would not be free to join the public option. You'd pay premiums for that. But other things to do to fix Obamacare that we were talking about before, that would take a little bit of money, so he'd need money for that. Biden, I probably will not be the first person saying Obama when I mean Biden.
No, Biden did that himself. He called himself Biden recently. So boy.
So just some other things. So Biden does have a significant climate plan.
Yeah,
to
and
deal
I'd
with
imagine
global
the
warming.
gap between him and Trump is pretty wide there in terms of climate change.
Yeah, the gap between Trump and everybody is pretty wide on
True.
climate because, I mean, I've said to some, including when I interviewed Bill Weld, who is still
Remember
running
him?
for
He is,
for
okay.
president as a Republican. I said, well, what's your climate plan compared? President Trump doesn't really have a climate plan. He said, no, President Trump does have a climate plan. It's to invest even more in fossil fuels. And we're actually hearing that as part of possible coronavirus response stimulus plan is tax breaks for oil and gas drillers.
Right.
I don't think that has a chance. But anyway, so Trump obviously very pro fossil fuel. And another thing Trump has done, not just tax breaks for that industry, but regulatory rollbacks. So that is one place where we've seen a lot of regulatory rollbacks.
And you think that would go away if Biden were to become president?
Absolutely. Anyway, so he does have a climate plan. I mean, I haven't mastered every detail of the climate plan. It's not the Green New Deal. He's not nearly as aggressive as that. And again, that's Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the Green New Deal. One of the reasons I think Bernie Sanders is losing. But Biden's climate plan is a net zero emissions economy by 2050, 2050. So 30 years from now. It sounds like a long way in the future, but that would be very hard to do. That would take tons of further investment.
It seems super aggressive.
It is very aggressive, but I mean, we have to do something.
Sure.
You have to set some target.
He'd put us back in the Paris Agreement, I would imagine.
He would put
Paris
us,
Climate
all the
Agreement.
Democrats have said they would rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement on day one. I'm not sure that would make a lot of difference. I mean, it helps to be part of this group that's about having discussions about things to do. It's non-binding. And then Biden also favors a carbon tax, which economists like. I mean, all the leading economists think a carbon tax is a good way to deal with climate change and force reductions in the burning of fossil fuels. We've talked about that a little bit before, but the basic idea is you set a schedule that everybody can see where you're going to impose a new tax on carbon, and you basically do it at the industrial level, but it will get passed on to consumers. And everybody is going to know this tax is going to go up over time. It's going to get more and more expensive, and that creates that means that creates an incentive to come up with other types of energy that are not subject to that tax. So, and that is economists like that because you're basically using a government lever to foster innovation in the private sector. So you're not telling, inventors and innovators in the private sector how to deal with climate change. You're just saying, if you can come up with a better alternative to carbon energy, which is going to get more and more expensive, you're going to make a lot of money.
Right. You're speaking of incentives
make a lot of
earlier.
money.
There's your incentive as an inventor.
Yes, gasoline prices go up because the tax gets passed on. If you heat your home with fuel or natural gas, yes, your costs go up. But you can also rebate. You can also do a rebate for consumers to try to make it basically revenue neutral.
Is this what Biden is proposing?
Something like that. So I don't know all the details of the Biden's carbon tax idea, but that is the general idea.
Okay.
I mean, this is actually kind of a mainstream idea. I mean, economists have been talking about this for a long time. Economists, and by the way, Ben Bernanke, former Fed chair, supports this. Janet Yellen, former Fed chair, supports this. I mean, sort of most of the preeminent economists have signed a letter saying this is the way. This is one of the ways to do it. So there's that. Just a couple other. So those are most of. There are other smaller tax changes that Biden favors. He does want to raise more revenue. He does support not free college for everybody, which is the Bernie Sanders plan. He would make 2 years of community college free. Again, that's an Obama idea. That was the Obama policy. And at this point, I think that's a fairly mainstream idea. I mean, people have thought over the Bernie Sanders forgive everybody student debt,
right,
and then make college free, and you have to come up with a ton of money from somewhere to do that.
And that's called tax everyone.
Tax
everyone
above
and he even
50,000
admitted
maybe.
it's going to have to be a middle class tax cut. We can go on and on.
Let me add one more important thing. No wealth tax. So Biden does not have a wealth tax.
Different from Sanders.
Very different from Sanders and from Elizabeth Warren and from Tom Steyer. And Biden has said he's kind of, put his hand out to billionaires, and he said, I'm not aiming to punish anybody. That's the phrase he uses. Nobody needs to be punished. So he doesn't feel like you're bad just because you're wealthy. And I think
there's
this
a nice
is one
idea
of the
for our
reasons,
capitalistic society.
I think this is one of the reasons Biden will, assuming he keeps it together, could be appealing as a general election candidate.
We'll see if he keeps it together, or if President Trump keeps it together, especially with the backdrop of this growing coronavirus fear. That's going to do it for this week, everybody. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. Be sure to follow me at Alexis TV News.
And me at Rick J. Newman. And be nice.
We'll see you next time. You don't have to be nice.